Hello, welcome to our webinar on connecting professionals and organizations to amplify our impact, brought to you by CFAIR, the Council on Food, Agricultural, and Resource Economics. My name is Jane Kolodinsky, and I'm the CFAIR Program Chair. It's my pleasure to be moderating today's webinar. Next slide. It's CFAIR's mission to translate high-level research and knowledge to a diverse audience that includes policymakers, elected officials, and federal administrators. When we demonstrate the value of the profession to these groups, the Council increases public appreciation for research, extension, outreach, and academic programs in agricultural and applied economics. Before we get started, just want to provide you some background on today's topic. Collaboration among organizations is a vital catalyst for enhancing research, education, and outreach. In today's webinar, we'll explore inspiring examples that forged connections beyond a single organization to make meaningful contributions to society's economic and social well-being. Our session today is showcasing 3 examples of how partnerships between professions can lead to impactful collaboration and service. The Council on Food, Agriculture, and Resource Economics, that's us, CFAIR, demonstrates how board service can create positive change. Additionally, we'll discuss the role of USDA advisory boards that provide valuable insights to the Secretary of Agriculture on key issues. One of our focal points will be on the National Agricultural Research, Extension, Education, and Economics Advisory Board, which exemplifies effective collaboration. We're also going to explore cooperative agreement landscapes, where researchers and government professionals collaborate to address critical research questions. By uniting our complementary expertise, we significantly enhance our impact and better serve the communities we come from. Next slide. CFAIR has assembled a panel of experts to discuss their work, starting with Gal Hochman. Gal is a professor of environmental and resource economics in the Department of Agricultural and Consumer Economics at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Dr. Hochman received his PhD in economics from Columbia University in 2004. While coming out of his PhD, he focused on international trade agreements and crony capitalism. His stay at UC Berkeley introduced him to energy and agricultural biotechnology. And his current focus includes issues related to development, energy, the environment, technology, and trade. Next slide. Kenret Y. Jefferson Moore, PhD, is a professor and chairperson of the Department of Agribusiness, Applied Economics, and Agri-Science Education, and director of the HBCU Agricultural Business Innovation Center at North Carolina A&T State University in Greensboro, North Carolina. Dr. Jefferson Moore's research interests include the economic and market evaluation of local and organic foods, value-added agriculture, and specialty crops. She has collaborated on several projects across 1890 and 1862 land-grant institutions and USDA agencies. Next slide. Tyler Mark, PhD, is a professor of production economics in the Department of Agricultural Economics at the University of Kentucky. His applied research interests include hemp economics, specialty crop production costs, precision agriculture, whiskey production costs, and renewable energy. Current projects include the economic impact of hemp production, hemp costs of production, dairy policy, factors that impact the profitability of Kentucky farmers, estate labeling of whiskey, and the impact of wind and solar installations on land value and use. Next slide. Before we start, we wanted to explain how to ask questions during the webinar to make sure that you, the audience, knows how to engage with us. During the webinar, you can put questions to one or all of the speakers by typing them into the box in the control display panel, accessed by clicking on the question drop-down, as shown on the slide, and sending it to the organizer. Next slide. Now I'll hand the webinar over to Gal, who'll start us off. Welcome, Gal.
Thank you very much, Jane, for inviting me, and it's a pleasure being here. The Council on Food, Agriculture, and Resource Economics, CFARE, is an organization that I'm its board chair and is led by 16 volunteers from various institutions, as well as one paid staffer. Next, please. CFARE's mission, as noted earlier, is to translate knowledge. It's to explain the knowledge being created by agriculture and applied economics professions through educational programming to policymakers, congressional staffers, stakeholders, and leaders of the federal administration. In addition, CFARE aims to communicate the questions and needs and concerns of various stakeholders to our professional community, so we will better understand the issues that many are facing when making policy decisions. Through the fostering of collaboration, we aim to help align the academic research with real-world challenges and priorities. Next, please. Next, please. To achieve these missions, these objectives, CFARE functions based on a few core values. A very important one is collaboration. We want to advance the applied economic profession by continuously developing effective communication pathways, as we'll allude to in a few minutes. We strive for excellence by distills authoritative economic analysis from scholars and leading people in the field, and communicating that information effectively to those that can benefit from it. We pride ourselves in integrity, in remaining a bipartisan organization that its sole purpose is to convey that information for both sides through innovations and relevance. Next, please. Who we are. As we said, we're a board of 16 members that are all volunteering for the same common goal. And they're led by a board chair. There are 3 committees sitting under the board chair. One is the program committee, which Jane heads. There's also a communication committee, and there's a finance chair, and the rest of the board that is wonderfully supporting us in moving many of the ideas presented through CFARE forward. We also have one paid staffer, Lisa, which makes all of this happen. CFARE is a national organization or aims to represent the US as a whole, and as such, we pride ourselves in members from all parts of the US, from the north to the south, to the east to the west, as well as in the middle and the plains. Next, please. So how do we do that? What are the core programs that we put forward to try to present the information that we would like to present to stakeholders and staffers and policymakers? At our core, our webinars. This is something that started with COVID, and we endorse, and this is what we're doing right now, where CFARE invites distinguished experts and to engage in discussions on various topics. And a few examples are below, from trade to relationship with other countries, as well as collaboration and value to policymakers. We choose those topics, identify the experts, and then put together a webinar, a 1-hour webinar that is condensed, yet we hope or we aim to make it informative. Next, please. Another part of our core programs is our newsletter. Both the newsletter and the webinar are appearing about once a month. December we skip because people's commitments, as well as 1 month in the summer when most people actually are attending to more serious and important topics that are related to their own personal life. Um, the second part of our core activities are our newsletters. In those newsletters, the first part of the newsletter is usually led by one of CIFR's board members, and we rotate through that. They write an editorial piece on a topic of interest and importance and relevance. And a few of those topics that came out this year are below, from food prices to the egg and avian flu problem to innovation and entrepreneurship and agriculture policy. In addition, the newsletter also presents 3 papers each month of topics that are of relevance to the editorial piece and or the webinar. And that is CIFR's way of trying to promote and help our own colleagues from our own profession and showcase their work in the context of the topics that we focus on. Next, please. In addition, and this is what was used to be CIFR's role in the past, we do try to promote in-person events as much as we can. We organize workshops on important topics. Sometimes it is in a response to what agencies request us. Sometimes it is topics that have been culminated through the board meetings and the board members view them as an important a question or a issue that needs to be further thought of. CIFR is actively involved in workshops both that are of more of a passive nature as well as very active, as we did with one of the sister organizations, CBSI. We also collaborate, in addition to collaborating with agencies, we collaborated with associations from the AAEA to the ASSA. The events, in-person events, many times because they are focusing on policy, they are targeted and administered in DC. However, in other cases, they're scattered throughout the US based on where the associations are meeting and the needs of the importance of those topics. They're usually well attended, and the idea is to trigger further learning and foster more collaboration on key topics that based on what the demand that is being proposed to us and what we think as a board is something important to discuss. Next, please. CIFR also every now and then puts podcasts. Our last series, Get a Grip on Fair, aimed to introduce government agencies focusing on the social economics aspects of it, as well as and have a podcast, a half an hour podcast with each one of the administrators. That's the podcast series. We also have a yearly collaboration with the graduate student section at the AAEA, and that is the policy brief competition. It is highly recommended for students. And what we learned from the past, communication is very important in our profession, and sometimes it is overlooked. This competition tries to foster that and help uh, showcase it to students as they move from graduate, from a PhD candidate to a faculty uh, um, or employed in either government agencies or industries. They understand how to communicate, and in this specific example is to teach them about the policy briefs. Next, please. To achieve all of that, CIFR as a board with our staff aims to understand both languages, both what the scholars, the academic languages is, as well as what the real world language is. What are the concerns and questions being posed in real time that is affecting people in their day-to-day life? We aim to simplify the message, which is, for example, the webinar. We aim to make short webinars and without sacrificing its accuracy. We aim to contextualize it, and we want the identity and address the practical questions out there. Very important to us is the objectivity. CIFR aims to inform of concerns, of problems, of questions, plausible solutions, but they pride themselves in remaining objective, and through that we aim to build trust and credibility with various agencies, stakeholders, scholars, and staffers that we communicate as we move forward. Again, thank you very much for inviting me. It is really a pleasure to speak in a CIFA webinar.
Thank you all for that presentation. I just want to remind everyone to send questions to the organizer using the question drop-down menu. Next, we'll be hearing from Kenra. Welcome, Kenra.
Good afternoon, Jane. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate this. Before I talk to you a little bit about my role with the NARI Advisory Board, I'd like to share how I got started. I want to tell you that service is one of those gifts that keeps giving. One of my former supervisors reached out to me and she said, there is a board, a NARI board, and they're looking for an 1890 land grant representative. And I think you'd be really good for that role. And so when I looked it up, found out that I could find the information on the Federal Register and how to apply, and I was sold. So I put together an application, which consists of an updated CV, a review of your interest, as well as a letter of nomination from your organization or institution. And typically the notice comes out early year of the calendar year. And then you're notified whether or not you're entered into a selected slate near the new fiscal year, which would be October 1. And so I was selected, very excited to take on this new role. I will admit I was very, very nervous because it was at the national level. And so I just jumped in with, I guess, my head above water, so to speak, and got started. But I will say, next slide, that my service has been the gift that keeps giving. I started as a representative for the 1890s, which falls underneath the category of agricultural research, extension, and education. And I started as a general member. And I thought I would just kind of sit there and learn, but people kept reeling me in and wanting to know, well, who are you representing, and what are you standing for? What do you think about this and that? So I opened my mouth and I ended up being nominated as vice chair in the second term and now chair of the board. And it has been a wonderful experience. I'm located here in Greensboro, North Carolina, and one of the roles of the chair is to facilitate 2 annual meetings, and we typically have those in October, November, and June of each year. Well, because of COVID and because of a freeze on funding due to the Farm Bill, we weren't able to meet in person every 6 months. But every, I guess June 24 and June 23, we were able to meet. And this is us in North Carolina. We hosted at the Kannapolis, North Carolina Research Center, and that's a few of us there. Jane is right beside me. And we had a wonderful time. But one of the things that we do when you come to the annual meeting is bring a topic of interest or issue for your stakeholder group. And so I just provided an example of some of the issues that we face at the 1890 land grant institutions. Next slide. Well, I want to give you just an overview of what the NARI Advisory Board actually is. We keep saying NARI, but what is NARI? NARI is the National Agricultural Research, Extension, Education, and Economics Advisory Board. And I have to read that because the E's always twist me. But it contributes to effective federal agricultural research, education, and economic programs via stakeholder feedback and sound science in its ongoing role as advisor to the Secretary of Agriculture. I did not say this, but one of the wonderful things about serving on the NARI board is that your assignment or your commitment is acknowledged in a letter from the Secretary of Agriculture. And I must say that's a wonderful recognition to receive as a service that keeps giving. One of the focus of USDA's research, education, and economics mission area, which is the area that we are providing feedback and recommendations to, we service the 4 science-based USDA agencies: Agricultural Research Service, Economic Research Service, National Agricultural Statistical Service, and the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. Next slide. Our advisory board members make up 4 key areas: industry, consumer, or rural interest groups, also national farm or producer organizations, the Ag Research Extension and Education Group, which is the category that I represent, and also academic or research societies. Our board is comprised of a balanced and diverse group of individuals and experts, subject matter experts in their areas and fields. And we typically serve 2-year terms, but we have now recently gotten an extension. So these terms are now 3 years, but you serve up to 6 years, 2-year terms, 2 terms at most. We also develop our reports as a group, and we make recommendations to the USDA. And we're comprised of 4 major committees and subcommittees. They are Executive Committee, National Genetics Resource Advisory Council, the Citrus Disease Subcommittee, and our recent added subcommittee, the Pollinator Subcommittee. Next slide. One of the primary roles of the NARI board is to conduct an annual review. And that annual review is an area that is either provided or recommended by the Undersecretary of REE or the advisory board itself. We then vote on the review or the topic of interest. And this particular fiscal year, we have selected precision nutrition. The annual review of all of our agricultural and natural resources research, extension, or educational activities funded by the USDA are a part of that review. In this precision nutrition, we look at the relevance of it and the department's establishment of research, education, and economic priorities, and to advise USDA on the adequacy of funding for such activities. In the Precision Nutrition RNA report, we focus on nutrition assistance, food and nutrition insecurity, diet-related chronic diseases, cancer, moonshot, and community engagement. Next slide. If there are any questions that you may have about considering membership on the board, I please ask you to reach out to me at the number presented here or my email address. I would be more than happy to tell you how to apply or help you through that process. Thank you so much, and thanks for having me, Jane.
Thank you, Kenra, for that very informative presentation on just one of the many advisory boards to USDA. Remember, don't forget to send your questions to the drop-down box to the organizer. Next, Tyler Mark from the University of Kentucky is going to present. Welcome, Tyler.
Thank you, Jane, for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. Jane, they asked me to talk a little bit about grants and cooperative agreements and kind of the differences between them and how they function and some of the value proposition, basically, that the land grant system or any universities bring to these types of components. So Next slide. So I thought it was worthwhile to kind of give you a flavor of where I'm kind of coming from, so that you know kind of what I've done in my past and where some of my comments come from. So I've been on over 46 million in grants. Please don't take that as me. I've been very fortunate to be part of great teams and at the beginning, and now I get the opportunity to put together teams. Jane being one of them that's on a number of the teams that I work on. So we've been fairly successful in that. I've had federal grants from USDA NIFA, AMS, their grant program, NSF, Department of Energy, just to name a few. I have not had anything out of foundations, which is an interesting area that I haven't really operated in at this point in time. Additionally, a lot of these grants, some other grants I've had have been corporate grants or corporate sponsorship to do certain research projects, state projects, specific internal university, and then I've even done some international projects from international companies, trying to look at a lot of different facets of that. And if you have questions on the differences kind of among those, because they vary widely, please feel free to reach out and ask anything about those. So next slide. So in general, I want to kind of compare and contrast the federal grant program versus kind of the agency cooperative agreements. When you start to look at the federal and state grants, typically they're on a normal cycle and have a kind of a standardized length. So somewhere between 1 to 5 years. Typically, some of them could be a little shorter than that. Some of them have like an 18-month window. I've got a couple that are 18 months. So, but they tend to be pretty standardized. The RFAs are standardized. You kind of really know what the RFA is going to kind of look like, or key things that you should be going for, or they'll provide details in there about what their specific interests are. In addition, you can really dig into some of the strategic plans for NIFA, NSF, NIH, and look at what their strategic plans lay out as key things to look at going forward. So that's kind of a couple things in that. The oversight on those is a little different too. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. And then you get some standardized reporting requirements out of those. Outputs are also quite different. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we kind of jump over here to the agency side now. So I have had cooperative agreements with ERS, AMS, ARS, and each one of those is a little different. The funding amount is different. The funding mechanism is a little different. The timelines on those are a little different. So, for example, the ARS NACA agreement is a 5-year agreement. Now, that 5-year agreement rolls with an ARS research station we have located on the University of Kentucky. So that's how I end up in those types of components. The ERS, so I've had multiple ERS cooperative agreements. Those have been anywhere from 1 year to 2 years. And then I had an AMS project that I thought was going to be 1 year, and now we're on year 4 or 5 of it. And I'll talk a little bit about that because I think when you get into the cooperative, one of the really interesting things about the cooperative agreements versus the federal grants. So, for example, we proposed a fairly large survey of hemp producers across the country with this AMS cooperative agreement. With the way the money flows to that requires that survey to now go through the OMB process. And that survey has been tied up in OMB now for almost 4 years. So that's one thing that we see there. Juxtapose that to the federal grant system where you don't really have to do that because you don't have to go through the Paper Reduction Act component when the money comes directly from the agency in a cooperative agreement. So you get these odd things that happen like that. So if you're going to look at these cooperative agreements, please understand what the regulatory framework is and the rules and the processes around that, because that can really slow or speed things up, depending upon what it is. Additionally, in cooperative agreements, you're probably going to be working specifically with 1 or 2 people at the agency, and you're going to have to work very closely with them. This is a great opportunity to do that. They have some really, they can have access to some resources at the agencies that you don't have access to at the university. So it makes for a really good pairing in that process. And also keep in mind the review process is different. So as an academic, we're typically used to doing peer-reviewed publications. Well, a peer-reviewed publication goes out, it's and comes back. In a cooperative agreement, that output that you put together may go to multiple different agencies within the parent group. So, for example, we've done ERS outputs that have had to go to FSA, AMS, ER, and a couple of others that weren't really even known to me, agencies to get reviews done. So the review process on some of the outputs under the cooperative agreements can be even more stringent than what is in the peer review process we typically think about in the traditional federal grant program side of things. Additionally, what you're going to find with cooperative agreements is they are kind of random, or maybe not random, but they are very focused on a specific topic. So for example, we got tasked with doing a congressional report specifically on hemp that had a very tight timeline of about 6 months. So we had a 6-month turnaround on that piece. So it was very focused for very specific output that went with that, versus a grant which may be 1 to 5 years. The outputs are in the original grant, but they may not actually even hit until after the grant is finalized or finished. So keep in mind you have some different things that happen there in that process. Next slide. So what I would say is that the cooperative agreements have been a great gateway for me. I work in some very specialized areas, specifically on the hemp side. I got into that way early. And at the point in time I was starting into that, ERS and USDA had not done anything at all on hemp since the mid-90s. So I was able to add a whole lot of expertise to that they didn't have. In addition, what we saw in that space is that states were out in front of the federal government in terms of implementing these policies and actually hitting the ground running with that. So we did a lot of education for the agencies, trying to update them on what's happening at the state level. So that's why I say it's a pretty good value proposition. We bring in expanded knowledge base and or capacity to these agencies that may be very resource constrained in terms of human capital, and we can add a lot to those areas. I've done that both in hemp and dairy. We're also working on a land value project right now too, looking at solar and the impact of, or what type of land is being taken up with solar installations across the country. So I'm kind of really looking forward to finishing that project. And the output out of that's going to be really interesting. What I will say is that the cooperative agreements also really provide a bridge kind of in times of transition. So when we looked at shifts in government employees and shifting around, we saw specifically when ERS and NIFA moved to Kansas City, we saw some losses of institutional knowledge there, and we were able to help fill some of those gaps. So I think that was a really interesting component value that we brought to that. And some of the costs and stuff for these can be fairly reasonable. Indirect rates tend to be fairly low, so they're just a really interesting mechanism to help bring additional value to both the university and to the federal agency that you're working with. So if you have any questions on this, please feel free to reach out. Jane, it's back to you.